Hi, I'm Yoram Solomon, and in this video or series of videos, I will show you how I decide how to get a computer, whether it's a laptop or a desktop. Now, I know that there are people that are smarter than me and people who are a lot more technical than me, even though I was involved in with personal computers ever since they came out and even before that. But really what I'm sharing is how I'm deciding what computer to get, how I'm evaluating computers. And I'm going to show the different elements, and this may be a pretty long video, so I want to make that disclaimer. I will probably post it as one long video, but also post it as a video series so you can go to just the right component that you're interested in. So again, this is how I choose a computer. So if you have different ways, and if you think that what I'm saying is bull and you don't agree with something, that's fine. You do your own thing. I'm sharing how I'm doing it. Okay, so what am I going to discuss? First of all, I'm going to take you through the selection process, and I'm actually going to go downstairs and go through the websites and kind of annotate, tell you how I'm looking at different computers for different purposes. I'm going to choose 3 different computers. So one of them is going to be a laptop that I may take with me to give presentations and give talks in person. Another one is going to be a video editing computer, and it's still going to be a laptop. And the other one, and this is going to be something that I will also be using to do OBS and Zoom and live streaming. And the last one is going to be a desktop. So for the same purposes, and I'm choosing 3 types because those are types that us speakers typically use. And so here is how I choose which one to take. Now, the first, well, let me take you through the outline. And the outline is, I'm going to talk next about why do you need the computer, desktop versus laptop, what operating system to choose, and do you need to choose the latest and the greatest. I'm standing here in front of this because I want to show a very general block diagram of what's in a computer, because then I'm going to attack each one of those blocks and talk about that. So the next part is going to be that I'm going to go into details, and I'm going to start discussing each one of those components and what are the alternatives and why would I choose one over the other. So we'll talk about the processor, the bus, the RAM, the memory, the disk, graphic processors if you have one, the display itself, and the input-output connections to the world. Next, I will actually go through the ordering process and show you how I really order a computer. So with that, I'll move to the first part, and the first part is going to be why do you need a computer? So the first question is, ask yourself, what do you need it for? Because different computers will be good for different purposes. Do you need to spend $2,000 on a computer if all you want to do is take it on the road and present? Probably not. Is it enough to spend $300? You can get a Windows computer for $300. Is it enough to spend $300 for a computer that you're going to be using for video editing? Probably not. But I don't want you to just say, well, this is the price for a certain computer, even though you are going to see a correlation. I want you to know how to choose the different components. So this might be a computer that you're using for presentation, taking it on the road. This might be a computer that you are going to buy to conduct virtual webinars or meetings, and maybe use OBS, maybe use more than that. So you're going to need some processing power for that. This might be something for video editing or gaming. And I'm saying video editing or gaming simply because the requirements and typically the hardware and even the software are very similar between a video editing computer and a gaming computer. So this is why the laptop that I'm using and I'm editing these videos with is actually a gaming computer. I bought it as a gaming computer, and there's really only one game that I do play on it beyond video editing. And I started the first couple of years with that laptop. I did no gaming whatsoever. And I'm not ashamed to do gaming. I fly flight simulators. I can land an F-18 in an aircraft carrier. Can you? Okay, this can be a computer that you're buying for productivity, office productivity. So you're going to use a lot of database applications, not a lot of graphics, but you're going to be using Excel and Word and things like that. Any other reasons why you're buying a computer? So before you buy one, you have to ask yourself, what is it that I'm buying the computer for? Now, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to show you where you find the requirements by the type of software. To determine the hardware that you need to run certain applications, it's really the applications and mainly the heaviest applications that determine what is it that you need. And so what I've done is I'm looking at three main applications. I'm going to be looking at Microsoft 365. This is the entire Office suite. I'm going to be looking at Adobe Premiere Pro, which is a video editing software. I'm going to look at a game, a high performance game. So let's first open a browser window, and just so that you can see it better, there it is. And really all you have to do is take your software, the software that you want to use this laptop or desktop with, and just write the name of it and systems requirement. And this is really what's going to come up. So I'm just going to click on this one. This is not the ad. And it's going to say system requirements for Microsoft 365 and Office. We're going to go to the subscription plans, which is really what I have. And as you go through it, what you're going to see is these are the requirements. So it needs for Windows, because Office runs on both Windows and Mac OS. So for Windows, it requires at least a 2-core CPU or processor that runs at 1.6 gigahertz, and that's pretty low. Memory, in terms of RAM, it needs at least 4 gigabyte of RAM, or 2 gigabyte if you have a 32-bit system. Again, this is really on the low end side. Hard disk, it requires for Windows, I'm only addressing Windows here, 4 gigabyte of available disk space. Display, you need at least a 1280 by 768, which is kind of high definition, not full high definition or FHD, which would be 1920 by 1080. Graphics, you need graphics hardware acceleration with DirectX 9. That's software that, I think that today Windows is at about DirectX 11 or something like that, or Windows 10. Your operating system, again, Windows 10, server if you need that, browser, a current version of whatever browser, Microsoft Edge, Internet Explorer, Safari, Chrome is what I use, Firefox, and a few other things. Now, notice that what they're saying, actually there are requirements for the business, education, and government. Doesn't look like it's significantly different, but just keep in mind one thing, especially with Microsoft, they typically tend to go on the low end side. So will it run? Yes, it will. Will you get great performance with it? Not so much. You're not going to get great performance. With that, let's move on and check Adobe Premiere Pro, a video editing software, and see what they require. So again, once again, all you have to do is just type Google Adobe Premiere Pro systems requirement. I'm going to skip the ad and I'm going to go straight into, well, systems requirements. So I'll click on that and let's see what comes up. Here are the Premiere Pro systems requirements. I'll go down, and here you can see that there is a minimum specifications and a recommended specifications. So note that you may want to not necessarily choose a computer based on minimum specifications, but at least the recommended ones. So the processor here, you need a 6th generation Intel processor or an AMD Ryzen 1000 or more or newer. Recommended is Intel 7th generation, and I'll show you later when I talk about the CPU and the processor where do you find the generation, because it's really it's part of it. You'll see it. Operating system, you need Windows 10. For minimum requirements, you need 8 gigabyte. I don't know how well 8 gigabyte would do with Premiere Pro, but 16 gigabyte if you need high definition media. So if you're editing 1080p, full high definition media, you'll need 16 gigabytes. If you want to do 4K or more, you'll need 32 gigabytes. I am doing full high definition, so HD 1920 by 1080 for the most part. I do have 16 gigabytes and it's working. GPU, you need a graphic processor. And they actually have a list of graphic cards here, which I'm going to click on in a second. But whether you need 2 gigabytes of virtual RAM, video RAM, not virtual RAM, for the graphic processor, or 4 gigabyte, they recommend 4. And the two computers that I showed you before had 6 and 8, so they would be good. Let's take a look at the recommendation. So they have a list of recommendations for Windows using CUDA, which is what typically they use, or OpenCL. You don't need to worry about that. Just see what they're allowing. My computer has, my laptop actually has a GTX 1050 Ti, which oddly enough is not listed here, but it's definitely stronger than the 980. It's just one generation lower than the 1060. The ones that I showed you today had the 2060, and by the way, they are currently, their current version is the 3080. That is, if you can find it. Again, if I'll go back up to the system's requirements, I'm back in Windows. GPU, hard disk drive, you need at least 8 gigabyte of hard disk drive space. Note that for normal or recommended, they're asking you to have a fast internal solid state drive, SSD. We'll talk about that when we talk about the drive. And cache, maybe additional high-speed drive for the media itself. So those are interesting things to know, that this is what they recommend, but they're going to tell you, they're telling you that it's going to work on something less than that. So again, high definition minimum, full high definition is recommended. Sound card, not that big a deal, not at least for Premiere Pro. And whether you need Ethernet, it really depends on whether you're sharing things and sharing their workflow. So that's that. Just, to show you, I'm going to this is the only game that I have running on my laptop. This is a flight simulator. It's a digital combat flight simulator. It's one of the most famous ones, one of the best ones. And again, all you do is DCS system requirements, and it's going to take you pretty much there. And it's all in one page. Minimum system requirement, 64-bit Windows. It's not going to run on 32-bit. This requires 64-bit. At Windows 7, 8, or 10. DirectX 11. CPU, they recommend Intel at least Core i3. It's 2.8 gigahertz, and I'll show you that. I'll explain that when we talk about the CPU. You'll notice that for high graphic settings, they require at least an i5 running at 3 gigahertz, or the equivalent AMDs. RAM, storage, random access memory, 8 gigabytes or 16 gigabytes for heavy missions versus 16 gigabytes and 32 gigabytes for heavy missions. Free hard disk space, 120 gigabytes required for both of them. They strongly recommend, not strongly, but they recommend to have a solid state drive. They didn't recommend that as a minimum. So will it run without a solid state drive? Yes, but they recommend it. Discrete video card. So here they're saying at least have a NVIDIA GeForce 760 or the AMD kind of equivalent. But if you want better performance, they're asking you to have at least a GTX 1070. So I'm actually at 1050 Ti, and which is less than that. They're offering you several ones. 8 gigabyte of VRAM is recommended, of video RAM. There is another recommendation for VR systems. It doesn't really apply to us. That's virtual reality. This is having goggles. So this is essentially, you know what? I'm going to take one more. I'm going to say OBS system requirements, and they actually even, I guess, say 1050p. And let's say what they're saying. System requirements for OBS. DirectX 10, at least GPU. They are recommending a GPU. Windows 8, 10. Hardware encoders, they are recommending that you use a GPU, which I have. So you can, every piece of software that you might have will have this. Just Google the name of your software and system requirements or hardware requirements, and you're going to find this, and this would help you know what are the minimum requirements that you need for your computer. And it gives you requirements for a balanced computer where you don't have one component that's, you know, over the top and another one that's a lazy dog and will hold you back. So think about the software that you're going to need, that you intend to run on this computer, and based on that, choose or at least set the minimum to what you're going to need, especially when we start talking about hard disk drive. Hard disk drive for DCS said it requires at least 120 gigabytes, but this is per software, so any other software is going to add to that. You need more storage on your disk drive. The next item is, do you need a desktop or a laptop? And that's an interesting question. I mean, obviously, if you're taking it on the road, you're not going to take a desktop with you. But if you're going to use it mostly at the office, should you be getting a desktop or a laptop? I think the first way to answer this question is to say what are you going to connect it to. So you're typically going to connect it to a projector, to Ethernet, your network, your internet through cables, Ethernet. USB, you're going to have a few USB connections that you're going to connect. Is it going to be USB 2, 3, USB-C, which is the latest version? Do you need Wi-Fi and Bluetooth? Do you only need one of them? Do you need none of them? One thing to keep in mind with all of those connections, I typically don't restrict myself to the laptop or computer that I'm buying based on the connections that already exist on the computer, simply because you can buy adapters. And I'll talk more about those adapters. Another thing is, when you make that decision between a desktop and a laptop, one thing that used to be true and is, I would say, a little less true, although still is to some extent, you get more performance per dollar with a desktop than you would with a laptop. And what I did is I went to the Dell website and I looked for two computers. One was a Dell G5 desktop, the other was a Dell G5 laptop. G is their kind of low-end gaming platform compared to Alienware, which is their higher end and more expensive. And I tried to get two computers with relatively similar performance and similar parts. So what I got was, for the desktop, an i7 10700KF CPU with 8 cores and 16 megabyte of cache for roughly the same price. With the laptop, I still got an i7, an Intel i7 10750H, but only with 6 cores, and this was a laptop version, so it has lower performance, only 12 megabyte of cache, and we'll talk about what cache is and why it's important. Both of them had an NVIDIA RTX 2060 graphic card, which is pretty good. The one that the desktop had 8 gigabyte of cache for the graphic card. The laptop version only had 6 gigabyte of cache, which is less and less performance. Both of them had 16 gigabyte of RAM, random access memory, 16 gigabytes running on a bus speed of 2.933 gigahertz or 2933 megahertz. The desktop had a 512 solid state hard disk drive, or disk drive, I should say, SSD, that's NVMe, and we'll talk about what it is, plus a 1 terabyte of a hard disk drive operating with the SATA, S-A-T-A interface, whereas the laptop only had the 512 gigabyte solid state drive SSD NVMe and didn't have an external drive. Both of them were just about the same price of $1372 versus $1249. Okay, the next question that you want to ask is the portability. of that computer, what is the size and what is the weight. And portability obviously applies mostly to if you're buying a laptop, not so much a desktop, because a desktop is not very portable. So the portability of a laptop, ask yourself, what screen size do I need? So you can, I think, still get 11 or 11-inch size screens. Those are pretty small, but they make for a very light, sometimes more expensive because of miniaturization laptop. My age, 11.6 inch laptop screen size. I still have one of those and it's getting really hard to see. You can go up to 17.3 inch. I'm sure that there are laptops with more than that, but very, very rare. 17.3 inch. I think that the 15 to 15.6 inch screen size is kind of the, I wouldn't say optimal, but kind of the sweet spot. And by sweet spot, it means that you probably get the biggest bang for your buck when you go with 15 to 15.6. They're big enough to accommodate good components and good performance at a reasonable size. Now, weight is another element. A smaller laptop, I looked at a 13-inch laptop, came with a 2.56 pound, came at 2.56 pound. That's pretty light, that's pretty easy to carry around. And I found laptops, and this is just looking at the Dell website, I found laptops at 9.04 pounds, a 9-pound laptop. And typically, the gaming computers, laptops, the ones that can do video editing, and I have one of those are on the heavy side because of what they have inside. Another thing to keep in mind is battery life. When you're buying a laptop, how long will the batteries last? Batteries, you can sometimes have different versions of batteries, but at the same time, you may have the same battery lasting longer on a smaller size laptop, on a lower performance laptop. So that's something to keep in mind. You may get a very high performance laptop and run out of battery very quickly. My video editing laptop or gaming laptop, if I take it on the road without a plug, it runs, if I'm running the GPU, the graphic processing unit, it can run for 25 minutes and run out of battery. And the lower performance laptops, really the ones that you're going to be using for presentation for the most part, you can run them on batteries probably for 6 to 9 hours, maybe even more than that. Another thing to keep in mind when you're trying to make the decision, do I buy a desktop or do I buy a laptop, is actually the ability to combine both. And it's not really combined, but buy both. So you're going to have a desktop for certain functionality and a laptop for anything else. So if you think about that, let's say that I decide that my presentations are typically going to be on a laptop. So I can take a lower power laptop, a $500 laptop really, and run my presentations off of it. But when I'm doing video editing or when I'm doing Zoom from my office, Zoom or anything else, live streaming webinars, virtual webinars, then I'm going to use the other one, and I can actually connect the two. So I can bring my presentation from one laptop into the other one because, you know, it comes out through HDMI, and I can have an HDMI to USB adapter or some kind of a mixer like the ATEM Mini Pro or anything else, bring it into the other laptop as a camera, as a source, and then you're kind of splitting the processing power, and you can keep both. So that's something else that I want you to think about. The operating system. Now, I used all three operating systems, and I say used in the past. I used Windows since before there was Windows. I used it when it was DOS, the disk operating system, DOS from Microsoft. I used Windows 1.0. I don't think that a lot of people know what 1.0 is, because I think that Windows really became popular when it came out with 3.1, which really had good graphic interface. 1.0 didn't have a graphic interface, so it was just the ability to do several things at the same time in parallel and leave one process and restart it when I come back to it. So I'm a Windows person. I did have a couple of MacBooks, MacBook Pros and MacBook Airs. Never grew on me. One thing to keep in mind is there's a switching cost. Things are incompatible. Yes, they're trying to be able to work on the same file types, but it's not necessarily the case in all times, and they may not be able to handle certain software or certain file types in one computer versus the other in a compatible manner. So it's kind of a commitment that you're making, and the switching costs are pretty high. If you decide one day you're switching from Windows to Mac, from Mac to Windows, it's going to be pretty hard. To tell you that one of them will absolutely not be able to support functionality that the other can, I can't tell you that. And the main reason is because you're going to find software. If Premiere Pro would not work as good on Apple, then Final Cut Pro would work on Apple and give you similar functionality. If OBS will not work on a Mac as much as it does on Windows, then you're going to have Ecamm that's going to run on Mac, and they're, again, pretty similar. There's one more type of a computer, and that's the Chromebook. I really love Chromebooks. We have quite a few Chromebooks here in our family. I still have one of them operating. And I use that mainly for applications that are web dependent. So things that are in the cloud and I can access them. And if anything happens to that laptop, then I'm going to just, throw it away, get another Chromebook, and just sign in, and I get access to everything I had before, with the exception of files that I did save locally. We'll talk about that. But for me, through this, I will talk about Windows computers. So I know that there are Mac people out there that I'm going to disappoint right now. And it's not that I think that Windows is better than Mac. It's just I've been using it for longer. And I don't know as much about the Macs other than when I had them in the past, but I didn't use them to the extent that I use Windows machines. So if you're a Mac person, what I'm going to talk about next in terms of peripherals and things like that would still apply. But when I do my comparisons and when I show you things on the websites, I am going to use Windows computers. So it's up to you whether you want to stick with me or not. It's time to show you the block diagram of a computer. This applies to laptops, desktop. This applies to Windows and Mac and really every processor, every computer. And I'm sure that there are going to be people who say, well, you missed that part or you missed that part. And this is not exactly how I look at it, but I go back to my disclaimer from before. I'm going to show you how I see computers. I am very technical. I did get into PCs before PCs were known to be PCs. I had the first one was actually an IBM personal computer. This is how I make my decisions. This is how I look at a PC. Okay, these are the most important parts. The first one that we typically look to is the one that's called the CPU. CPU is the central processing unit. It used to be that there was only one CPU. Now what we have is we have something that's called a core inside of the computer. So this is a core is really one CPU, and then there is another one and another one, and there could be more. Looking just yesterday, I think the laptop that I'm using today, and this is a laptop that I bought probably close to about 2 years ago, has 8 cores inside of that chip that's called CPU. So those are 8 processors that can do things in parallel. Generally, the higher performing or higher performance requiring software pieces require more cores and can handle multiple cores. So that's something you want to keep in mind. Another part that you have here is called cache. I'm going to talk about cache in a few minutes. I'm not going to go into too much detail right now. Now, the last thing that we have is we have clock, or I should say clock speed. So this is how fast do these cores or CPUs run. That's an important part. Another one is something that's called RAM. RAM is random access memory. RAM is the memory that the computer uses most of the time to work on. I'm going to call it the second level of RAM, and you'll see why I mean, or second level of memory. One thing about RAM is when you turn the computer off, whatever is in the RAM disappears. So RAM is kind of your work pad, what the computer works on right now until you shut it down. So where is everything else? Well, everything else stays in the disk. You're going to see several terms. You're going to see HDD, which is a hard disk drive. This was the first type of disks. Those were mechanical, and I'll show you what they look like. And today you're using a lot more of something that's called SSD, which is solid state disk. And if you think about it, it's like your USB flash drive or your SD card, except it has more storage and it's inside of the computer. What's special about these is that these, if this is a hard disk drive, so really something that turns, it's magnetic. If it's a solid state drive, it's flash technology. And what's important about it, when you turn the power down, they remember what's in there. So what do you have there? You do use part of it for operations, ongoing operations. This is where your data is. This is where your programs are. Okay. Now, if you have a video editing computer or a gaming computer, they may have a separate unit that's called GPU. GPU stands for Graphic Processing Unit. NVIDIA is one of the companies that makes most of them, probably the most prominent of them. Any laptop or computer that does not have a separate GPU has some level of GPU, something like Intel graphics that's part of the CPU or the motherboard chipset. But GPUs are kind of just like CPUs. They have multiple cores. This is supposed to be the word core. They have a certain speed. And they have their own cache, and I'll talk about cache in a second. One more thing that you have in a computer is display. Obviously, otherwise it's a little hard to communicate with the computer or know what the computer is doing without having a display. So you're going to have a display, and we'll spend some time talking about display. And finally, what you have in the computer is, I'm going to call it I/O, which stands for input and output. This is where you have things like, well, I'm going to write HDMI here, or VGA, or any other video connection, but typically they really come out of the GPU or somewhere else here. But, you know, generally I can look at them as input/output. This is your USB. This is your Ethernet. This is your Wi-Fi or Bluetooth, or anything else. These are the inputs and outputs. Now, obviously things need to communicate and connect between them. And so we have something in the center of this computer that's called the bus. And the bus is this component that actually has, all it does is it allows units or blocks to communicate with one another. And when they communicate with one another, by the way, in case you can't see, I just looked at the monitor, in case you can't see what the GPU looks like, I'll raise it up a little, and you can see that the GPU is really just a copy of what the CPU looks like. So it has cores, multiple cores, it has frequency, it has cache, and that's it. So you're not missing a lot by not seeing that block here. The bus is like a highway. This is how the different components connect with one another. So everything connects to this bus. Now, again, I'm simplifying this, and if there's somebody there that is a computer expert and so on, you're going to say, well, there are actually several buses that run there. Sure, but this is the main bus. The main bus has a speed. So I want you to think of this as a highway. I want you to think about the fact that all the cars in the highway drive in a certain distance one after the other, and they can drive in a certain speed. Now, you want to have more lanes in the bus, and you want to allow a higher speed limit. That is your bus speed, and this is also whether you have a 64-bit bus or a 32-bit bus, and the buses can actually go to 128 but just or 256 but just behave like a 64-bit bus, but they allow faster and faster communication between the components. Now, the most important part, I said you want to have pretty good access to the disk, but the disk is where typically you're going to store data when you're done with it, get data when you need it, and to start working on it, get the programs when you need them, or store the programs when you downloaded them. But for the most part, the CPU needs very, very, very fast storage to operate on right now. And so it used to be that the RAM was that storage. However, even the RAM, and the RAM is typically a lot faster than the hard disk drive. The ability that the CPU has to access storage here in the RAM is much faster than on the disk. However, that's not even the case anymore, because now we have, and I told you I'll get back to it, something that's called cache. Cache is even a faster RAM, and sometimes there are different levels of cache, even faster. It's smaller than this RAM. It's a lot faster, and mainly it's a lot faster because it is inside of the CPU. So the fastest operations, the immediate operations the CPU is working on are here. When the CPU is not working on something, it releases that to the RAM. I'm going to use a different color. It releases that information to the RAM and let it stay in the RAM. Sometimes we don't need this information right now, so we even release it to the disk, to a certain place in the disk that's kind of a scratch pad where we say, well, we don't need it right now. The RAM is bigger than the cache, and as I said, again, I'll bring it up, the GPU has cache as well. The bigger those caches are, the more the faster CPU can do things. Let me look at if there's anything else. Yes, I wanted to just make a comment. There are different components here in the computer. And the different components, each one of them can have higher performance or lower performance. It can have higher cost, typically associated with higher performance, or lower cost. Bottom line is, it's like a chain. A chain is as strong as its weakest link. And the problem that I see people sometimes run into is when they spend a lot of money getting a very high power CPU and not getting enough RAM for that CPU. So this CPU, overly powered, not enough RAM to operate on, so you're not going to get the best performance. Or they get good CPU, good RAM, and the disk, they use a hard disk drive as the main disk, the system disk, which is much, much, much slower than a solid state disk or an SSD, especially an M.2, PCI Express, NVMe. I'll explain all of these faster disks. Or they spend a lot of money on the CPU, not realizing that if they got a GPU, a graphic processing unit, it's going to offload a lot of the graphic functions off of the CPU. The display, you may not get a display that's powerful enough, or you may get a display that is so detailed and 4K display that the CPU is just going to, you're going to bring the CPU and maybe even the GPU down to their knees. Finally, the I/O. What do you want to spend on in the I/O? So keep in mind that what you need is a balanced system that would support what you want to use it for. You don't want to overspend on any component because you think that's the most important component. I got people saying, how much RAM do you need in a computer? Well, the answer to that is another question. First of all, what CPU do you have? What disk drive do you have? What do you need it for? Because for certain applications, for my daughters that go to college, for my wife that uses that to teach, you don't need more than 8 GB of RAM. And I'll talk more about that in detail when I get there. You don't need more than 8 GB of RAM. But if you need graphic, then you're going to need a lot more than that, a lot more than 8 GB. 16, maybe even 16 is not going to be enough. I want to make one more comment, and here's my conspiracy theory. And my conspiracy theory is that The hardware and software companies, so the Microsofts and the Adobes and others, software companies, and the hardware companies like the Intel that make the CPUs, and the memory companies, and then the Dells and HPs and Lenovo's and other computer manufacturers of the world have colluded to get us to buy new stuff every 2 years or every 3 years, because that's how they stay in business. I'm not going to rule out that this is a collusion, a conspiracy, but in reality, this is what happens. A new computer comes out. The software companies go, oh, there is more performance that's available to us. We can improve performance. We can improve functionality. And they create software that all of a sudden people who have the older generation computer, their computer is not supportive enough of that. So they're going to buy a newer computer, a more powerful computer that can support the new software or the new tools. And once they do that, the software companies go, well, you know, we have a new generation of computers, so why don't we add more functionality, add more features? I can tell you that I had a desktop before I bought my video editing laptop about 2 years ago. I had a desktop. I probably had it for about maybe 4 years, maybe even less than that. It was pretty powerful when I bought it, but when I got to buying this laptop, that desktop, when I produced a 5-minute video, rendering that video took about, and it did have a GPU, a graphic processor from NVIDIA, took about 30 minutes. A 5-minute video took about 30 minutes to render and create, which is fine. You know, you get the computer to do it and then you go and do something else, except you can do something else on that computer because you're going to be using the same resources. Then I got the laptop. The laptop reduced that time from 30 minutes to 25 seconds. It reduced the time from rendering a 5-minute video from 30 minutes on the older desktop to 25 seconds. And that was a significant improvement. And I was using relatively same software, but again, the software, Premiere Pro, what I'm using from Adobe, kept on improving and required more processing power and more capabilities from the computer, and therefore I had to get a new one. And probably I'm about a year away from getting yet another one, the next generation, that would make it even shorter, because I keep on loading it with more software, with more functionality. So, you know, it's not a real conspiracy, although it works really great for hardware and component and software companies, but that's why you're getting to replace one every 2-3 years, not necessarily a lot more than that. I want to address one final point, and that is, should you get the latest and greatest and spend top dollar? Should you get the cheapest? What is it that you should get? And I want to show you something that's happening in the technology arena, and I actually wrote about that in my book, my first book in 2007, Bowling with a Crystal Ball, where I talked about predicting future technology trends. This is what happens. I'm going to put it as a graph, and I'm going to put here performance and price. There's something interesting that's happening, and you will see that the relationship is something that looks like this. There is what I call a sweet spot. One of the best examples for this is if you take flash drives, for example. I think the sweet spot today for flash drives or SD cards is something around 128 gigabyte or maybe 256 gigabyte, where if you take how much it costs and you divide it by performance here in a flash drive or an SD card, is really the capacity. If you take the dollars, divide by the capacity, you're going to find that at a certain value here, which I think is about maybe 256 gigabyte, you're going to have the lowest dollar per capacity. So what happens before that? Well, before that, several things happen. One is you still need to have the same case, and the cost of the case is starting to become a bigger and bigger element or component in the overall price, while capacity is actually significantly lower. So it's starting to go up. The other thing is things become obsolete, and when they're obsolete, sometimes you can't find them anymore, not as much. So it starts to go up. But on the other hand, this is where you're starting to go into the, I'm going to call it the cutting edge. This is the cutting edge of technology. This is where the yields, so when you're building 100 of them, here probably if you're building 100 are, and this comes from the semiconductor industry, which I was a part of, when you're building the cutting edge technology or the sweet spot technology, your yield is probably very close to 100%. So you're building 100 of them work well. As you're starting to go higher here in higher, newer technology, cutting edge technology, this is where the yield starts going down. And now you can't make 100%, you can make 90%. In semiconductors, you're typically going to stay up there. I don't know if you remember when the first Pentium processors came out, and there was a Pentium 60 and Pentium 75 and Pentium 90. What you probably don't know is that they were all built as Pentium 90s, and those that were sold as 75 were those that did not pass quality control as 90, and those that were sold as 60 were those who did not pass quality control operating at 90 or at 75. So the closer you get to the cutting edge, the less or the more dollars per performance you're going to be paying. So to me, what I like to do is I like to buy technology around the sweet spot. So what is the processor that would give me the best sweet spot? And we'll go through that and we'll see what it is. What is the size of disk drive? And we'll go through that and we'll start comparing things, and you'll see that there's a sweet spot. So if you ask the question, or if I ask you the question, do you want to buy the cutting edge or less than that? The way I buy it, okay, forget recommendation, forget advice. The way I do it is I get the sweet spot. I get the level of computers, the performance of computers that gives me the biggest bang for the buck, knowing that there are computers out there that are better performing. And it's just a matter of, I know that in 3 years, I'm going to have to buy something else. I know that this is going to be the performance. And the other thing that I know is that at that point, this is where the sweet spot chart or curve is going to be. So I hope I answered this question. Next is I'm going to go through all of the components that I described in that block diagram. I'm going to start going through them one by one. And we're going to do that while watching a website of, or different websites of actually choosing a computer. I hope this is helpful. I hope this is what you were expecting, and I'll see you in the next part. It's time to start talking about the different components in greater detail. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about each one of those components, and I'm going to go through websites for 3 companies really, all Windows machines. Once again, we'll look at Dell, HP, and Lenovo, and we're going to start looking at specifications, and I'll share with you what I see there and how I make decisions. So the first a comment, I made it before, I'm going to make it again. Well, the first comment is I'm sharing how I make those decisions. But the second comment is it is important that you don't overkill in one component and underperform in another component, because the strength of the power of your computer is going to depend typically on the weakest link. So you can have a very powerful laptop, a very powerful CPU with not enough memory to support it, or a lot of memory with not a very powerful CPU that can make use of it. So we're going to start. The first component I'm going to talk about is actually the CPU itself. And as I said, we're going to start looking at a at three manufacturers, computer manufacturers. I'm going to take the full screen. And the first one I happen to open on Dell. So we're going to look at a computer. We're going to look at laptops. They typically separate for home and for business. And what I found is that you typically get a better deal on something that is aimed for home rather than for business. So I'm going to take one. They popped on the right. They wanted to help me. And they have different versions, different types of laptops. And, you know, since I'm going to look again for this time for a video editing laptop, we're going to do laptop here. I'm going to look at the G series, which is similar to what I currently have. So you can see that they help you decide what you want to get, and before giving you everything that they have, because I'm sure that they have quite a few computers, I'm going to say processor. I want to have an Intel Core i7, and as soon as I do that, now we already started limiting things, and by limiting it, it actually lets us take a look at what they're offering. So they have Intel Cores i5, 7, 9. Or AMD Ryzen 5 and 7. So AMD is another processor company, and there are people who would only buy AMD. There are people who would only buy Intel. It used to be, I'm not 100% sure it still is the case, that you can get for the same performance, you may end up paying a little more for Intel. For the most part, I bought Intel processors. Just recently, I bought one of my daughters for college, a laptop very similar to the other one, to the other daughter, but this one is with an AMD processor, and I don't think that any of them is complaining. These are not the generations. These are kind of, I'll call it the complexity of the processor. And so an i3, you know, for a G series, the gaming series, or video editing, in my case, there is no i3. i3 is just not powerful enough for a video computer or a graphic or a gaming computer. So there's i5 minimum, i7, i9, and if you remember, I think it was DCS that said don't get anything less than an i5. i5 is the absolute minimum. So we're going to take a look at one of them, and let's take a look at, you know what, let's take a look at the one that I was looking at before. This is the one. And what you can see is that it has an Intel Core i7, but they already specified this as a 10th generation. As the generations of processors evolve, the processors can give you more performance for lower power and typically even for less money. And this is simply because of the semiconductor, the silicon process that's getting smaller and smaller and gives you more performance, smaller size, lower power consumption. So if we clicked on that laptop, and we're going to take a look in greater detail, you can see it's a 10th generation Intel i7. See, the first two digits, or the first digit, is actually the generation. So what you can see here is this is a 10th generation. If this was a 9th generation, it would be called 9750H. And I'm not going to go through the rest of it, even though there is a formula for it. This is typically, as far as I look, the i7 or 5 or 9 and the 10th generation. Then you look at the cache. The cache itself, to remind you, is the RAM that is included, the memory that's included inside of the CPU chip. And the memory inside of the CPU chip is much, much faster than the RAM outside. And so you want as much as possible of that. So now we have 12 megahertz. The speed here is 5 gigahertz. The higher this number is, the faster the process is. And we have 6 cores. So essentially, we really have 6 CPUs in that one chip. And the more cores you have, as long as your software can use multi-core functionality. So kind of think about it as having multiple employees. And the more employees you have, the more you can break down the task and have the task done faster. And it's really that simple. So this is the processor that you have here. Let's see what other processors, what other computers are going to be like. So we're going with a G7 here. G7 has an i7. It's the same processor that I see. Let's see what a $2,000. I wonder if they have a $2,000 processor here or computer. Yeah, they have a 2000. So let's look at the 2001. What would we have here? We actually have the same processor. We have an i7 10750 12 megabyte of cache. So this is important. This is 12 megabytes of cache and 6 cores. So this is the same processor as we could get in a computer that had only 1200. So this essentially is the processor. This is kind of how to read what the processor is that you need, and we'll move to the next component. The next part we will deal with is the memory. I'm sorry, before we get to the memory, I want to talk about the bus a little. And again, the bus is this highway that connects all the different components. And this time what we will do is we will go into the HP's website and start browsing that one. And the reason I go with different ones is because, you know, sometimes they offer it, they look a little different. So they start with PCs here. And let's see their applications: school, everyday, premium, business. Of course, we're going to be looking at gaming computers. What else? And we're going to accept whatever they just said here because we're not going to read it. And let's see what did they have. So this is, I guess, let's shop now and see what the parameters are. We have a 10th generation. This is a $729 gaming computer. So it's kind of on the low end of gaming, and you can see that immediately because we have a 10th generation Intel, but the processor is an i5 processor. So let's see if we can find something that's better. I wonder why this is the first one that came up. I would have expected them to come up. There we go, with stronger computers. So it looks like this is, no, this one is the, it's kind of pretty parallel in terms of performance to the one that I showed you before from Dell. So we're going to click on this one and let's see. We already do see that, well, they're not taking us anywhere. They really want to help, but they're not taking us anywhere. So this time, oh, there we go. We're going into this computer. And in this computer, if we'll go to the specs, what we're going to see is these are the combinations. Look at the processor. We're looking at exactly the same processor that the Dell computer had at the same time. But what I care about now is I want to look at the storage, at the memory, because the memory is typically the only place where you're going to see the bus speed. And the bus speed you can see here is, it says 2933. That's 2,933 megabytes per second. So 2.933 gigabytes per second. That's the speed that they have here. And I can tell you, trust me on that, that this was the same number that we saw for the other processor, the other computer from Dell, the G7 from Dell. One thing that I do want you to notice is that it says DDR4 here, and DDR4 is a certain level of interface, and the higher the number, typically the faster the memory is going to be. But the bus itself is 2933. And that's as far as I want to talk about the bus. But since I'm here and we're talking about RAM, then I want to show you something about what RAM looks like. And RAM cards look like this. These are the memory cards. These are, I guess, a little older because I see that they're 2 gigabyte each, and they typically today, you know, I'm not even sure you can get 4 gigabytes. They probably start at about 8 gigabytes. This is what the cards look like. Now, there is something that I want you to consider. So there are several things I want you to consider. The first is, how much memory do we have here? How much RAM do we have? And in this computer, they're telling you that it's 16 gigabytes, but you can get it with 32 gigabytes. Now, you will notice that the 16 gigabytes comes with 2 cards that have 8 gigabytes each, and the 32 has 2 cards that are 16 gigabytes each. Well, can you get one card that's 16 gigabytes and get 16 gigabyte this way? This is something to keep in mind. There is a limited number of slots inside a laptop that would allow you to put storage there. And if you have only 2 slots, which is kind of typical for a laptop because laptop is pretty compact, there's not a lot of room there. If you have only 2 slots, if you bought a memory that is 2 by 8 gigabytes, you have 16, but if you want to upgrade, you probably need to replace both cards. So now you have to buy 32 gigabytes as 2 cards of 16. And you really already had 16, but if you bought your computer with 16 gigabytes as 1 card, you have 1 slot that's open, that's available for you, which means that if you want to upgrade your laptop from 16 to 32, all you have to do is just buy 1 16 gigabyte card. Another thing to keep in mind, and they're not saying it here, but sometimes you will see that where computers actually, I'm sure that if we went into a deeper dive in this computer, we're going to find what the maximum storage that it can handle. And so you want to make sure that you can upgrade beyond 16 gigabytes. I think that today for a laptop, assuming that you can go up to 32 gigabytes, whether you start that way or not, is a different story. But just your ability to upgrade later to a certain amount is probably pretty important. So when you look at memory, what you want to see is you want to see the speed of that memory. Let's go back to show you where was the memory? There it is. You want to see how big it is. What are you getting? Again, if you're going to get a computer with 8 gigabyte, very, very powerful processor and very, very powerful GPU graphic processor, but 8 gigabyte of RAM, that's not going to be enough. DDR3 is going to be slower. DDR4 is faster. 2933, I'm going to just skip back to the Dell and I'm going to show you, ooh, this Dell actually has 2666, which means that the HP laptop that I just showed you is faster. You get a faster bus and you get a faster interface. Look at the Dell here, actually still has a 2 by 16 gigabytes to give you a total of 32. So we care about, if I'll go back to HP, we care about how much storage, we care about the type of interface, fast interface, we care about the speed, and we care about how is it organized. Is it going to use the 2 slots? And if I want to upgrade, I need to upgrade both of them, or is it using only one of them? And if I want to upgrade, I have one available. Next component I want to talk about is the disk drive, and I'm trying to avoid calling it hard disk drive, but we do have hard disk drive. This is typically what a hard disk drive used to look like, the one on the right in blue. You can see that it is an electromechanical device. This circle in the middle that takes most of the size is magnetic, and all the information is stored on it. I'll make it bigger. All the information is stored on it magnetically. This is the head that is recording and reading from the disk. If you're dealing with the disk, one thing you want to make sure, a hard disk drive, first of all, they are a lot more susceptible to what happens if you drop the laptop or the laptop gets heat or something, or even moved too fast. This is where you may start having errors, so they may have they're more prone to what's called crash. It used to really be that the head was crashing on the computer, on the surface of the hard disk drive. So this is the more traditional hard disk drive, magnetic or electromechanic. And then there is the SSD, or solid state drive, solid state disk. And solid state disk is just, think of it just like a big USB flash card or a big SD flash card. It's based on flash technology. There are no moving parts, which means it's a lot more susceptible. It's a lot, not susceptible, it's a lot more robust. It is less susceptible to being hit and losing data or crashing or anything like this. It is a lot faster, and they are typically more expensive for the same amount of storage. There are different types. What you see here is referred to as SATA, S-A-T-A. It has an SATA interface, and an SATA interface is slower. This is typically okay for your data disk, but not so much for your program disk that needs to be accessed a lot faster. For a program disk, you would typically have something that's using a technology called PCI Express, and it doesn't say anything here, but this NVMe M.2 is really what says that it's PCI Express. You can see it's a different form factor. It's smaller, much faster. This one is a 500 gigabyte drive. I've seen 1 terabyte. Actually, in my laptop, I upgraded and I got a 1 terabyte drive. And I can tell you that the difference, I could feel the speed difference, the performance difference between how my computer behaved before and how it behaves now. So once again, let's go to the website. This time we haven't done Lenovo yet, so let's go to Lenovo. And once again, we're going to go with laptops. They have different types of laptops. And of course, we're going to look for gaming laptops. This was right in front of us, gaming laptops. So let's hit gaming laptops and see what they have. And once again, we're going to kind of follow the price, follow the dollars here so we can compare. And so here's a laptop that they have that has that costs about $1,300. Let's see what it has. For $1,300, what do we get? We're going to click on it and let's see. We get a 10th generation Intel Core i7-H processor. Kind of sounds like what we saw before. Let's see if there's more. Oh, guess what? It's the 10750H processor running at 2.6 up to 5 with turbo boost, 6 cores, 12 threads, 12 megabyte cache. It's the same processor that both HP Gaming and Dell Gaming had. But we're right now looking at the hard drive, and here's what we see. We see 2 hard drives. One is a 1 terabyte hard drive, hard disk drive, so this is the electromechanical type, and the other is a PCI Express SSD. In other words, one of them is going to look like this, except that it's a 1 terabyte, while the other is going to look like this. Now, when you are getting this kind of a computer, of a hard drive, there are a few other things that I want you to look at. And one, for example, is how fast does the drive run? This is the hard disk drive, not the SSD, not the solid state one. This is how fast it runs. They used to run, I think, at 3,600 RPM rotations per minute. Then 5,400 RPM, now they're running at 7,200 RPM. I don't know if they're going to run faster. I think they're just going to be replaced by SSDs altogether as the prices of SSDs get lower and lower to the point where it really doesn't matter. The difference is not that much. So I do expect these drives to go out. My laptop started with a 256 gigabyte SSD as the system disk, and a 1 terabyte, I think it was 7,200 RPM hard disk drive as the data disk or disk D. I ended up replacing this data disk with a 1 terabyte SSD, but using serial ATA, SATA interface, so it was a little slower. There was no second option to put a second NVMe PCI Express one. And I replaced the disk drive, the main disk drive, the system drive, from 256 to 1 terabyte PCI Express M2 NVMe SSD, which is very similar to what you have here. So when you're looking at disk drives, my preference is to always get SSD and SSD only. You need to ask yourself, how much storage do I need? And it really depends on what you're going to do with that computer. If what you'll do with the computer is only, I don't know, data applications, so office applications and things like that, you could probably get away with 500 gigabyte or 512 gigabyte total. You only need one disk. The computers I got my daughters and my wife have 512 gigabyte. That's enough. Actually, both my daughters' computers have 256 gigabyte, and it's enough for them for their college applications and the applications that they use. Once you're starting to talk about video and heavy applications, so first of all, the system itself, the software itself, if you remember when I looked at DCS as a software, the game, that required 120 gigabyte of hard disk drive just for that one application. You start talking about Adobe Premiere Pro and Photoshop and other applications, Microsoft Office, heavy applications, they're going to require a lot on the system disk by itself. Then there is the data. So what kind of data are you going to store? You know, Word documents don't take that much. PowerPoint take more. Once you start editing videos can be pretty darn big files. And in fact, I'll tell you that right now, my data drive is 1 terabyte. I'm less than 100 gigabyte away from filling that one up. And I'm starting to wonder whether I should get a 2 terabyte drive in there, although it's just going to be a matter of time before I run out of this, and or start offloading some of the videos to drives outside, to backup drives and so on. And since I did say backup, it is important that you back up all the information. One thing I will mention, and I can talk about Windows, Microsoft, or at least when you have an Office 365 account, you also have 1 terabyte of storage for their OneDrive. And that to me is important because what it means is that everything that I store on my disk data drive, you can see that it's a cloud drive, and so at the time that I store it locally in my computer, it also gets stored in the cloud. So I feel pretty comfortable if something happened, knock on wood, I hope nothing does, if something happened to this laptop or to the drive, which is an SSD, that I will be able to just download it from the cloud and it's there. Just to be on the safe side, I'm also backing it up on 3 different local disks here, including a network disk. It's time to start talking about the graphic processing unit, or GPU, in case you need it. This is what an NVIDIA, the RTX 2060 looks like, and this is the one that I showed you in the 2 computers that I compared, desktop and laptop at the beginning. This is what you would expect from a kind of mid-range gaming computer. Again, the reason I buy gaming computer is not necessarily because I play games. I actually got the digital combat simulator. I got it in because I had a gaming computer and not the other way around. I got the gaming computer for video editing because the requirements are similar. Let's go back to look at, we're going to take the entire, but you can see that this is a pretty bulky device that fits in a laptop. It does fit in a laptop. That's essentially pretty close to what I have. Once again, let's go back and see what we can get. And I think it's Dell's turn. So let's go back to Dell, and you can see that this one has the RTX 2070 Super, 8 gigabytes GDDR6. So it's not the same as DDR6. GDDR is graphic interface to storage, but same rule applies. The higher the number is, the faster the interface that the graphic card has with the rest of the storage that you might have in your computer and with the CPU. So again, we are looking at a gaming laptop, so you would expect to have something like that. If we start looking down, and you know, maybe I should have done this sooner. I just want to show you that at least with Dell, they give you different options. So this computer at $2,000 comes with an i7 10th generation, 12 megabyte of cache and so on. But there is, for $300 more, only $300, and only today, you can get an i9 10th generation that's running up to 5.3 with 8 cores, 16 megabytes of cache, and that probably is going to be a significant boost. Let's see the graphic card. I wonder if they have other options for the graphic card. It's kind of looks a little weird that there's only one option here. I lost the graphic card. There it is, more info. And let's see, that's just information about the graphic card. This is what they recommend and so on. But if we went back, and maybe that's what we should do, if we went back and started looking at other computers that Dell might have, this is what we're going to find. Let's look at home computers again. And when you start looking at the side, there is processor generation. They already have 11th generation. There's the price, there's the amount of memory, storage size, and so on. And then we get to the graphics card. So let's open this a little. And if you look at the graphics card, they say Intel graphics. This is an all Intel graphics. What it means is that the graphics or the graphics components are already incorporated in the motherboard itself. There is no special graphic accelerator. So there is some acceleration, but it's nowhere near any of those very powerful NVIDIA or AMD graphics. I don't know enough about AMD to be able to tell you how powerful they are, but you can see the different types of NVIDIA. And obviously, if you're going to go with this one, let's see, there are only 2 computers that have this one, and we just limited to them. They both are Alienware, and I think I mentioned it before. Alienware are the higher end gaming computers that Dell has. Both of them have 10th generation i9 processors. Those are $3,800 computers and more than $4,000. And they have the RTX 2080 Super 8 gigabyte and GDDR6. They both come with 32 megabytes. They have 4 terabytes of storage. This is a laptop, 4 terabytes of storage, 2 terabyte PCI Express. Both of them are PCI Express M2 or NVMe SSDs or solid state drives. So this is what they have. Once again, if you don't need to have applications like video rendering, video editing, or high-end gaming, you're okay with Intel graphics that are already on the motherboard without paying for an extra card, which, by the way, you can see from if I'll take back the picture, if I'll bring back the picture, you can see that it has fans on it because this thing gets hot. It's running high power, it gets hot, and you can imagine what happens when you run it off of battery. First of all, it probably derates itself to operate at lower performance, but secondly, it's going to kill the battery really, really fast. It's going to draw the battery. And I think I told you I was traveling internationally once with my gaming laptop, and I opened it up and I thought I'll just start working on video editing. Yes, video editing instead of gaming. I should have gamed instead. But I started video editing, and it told me that the battery is going to last for 25 minutes. That was it. Okay, this is graphic cards. Let's move on. And since we just talked about the graphic card, then maybe it's time to talk about the display itself. Now, this is where a gaming computer is going to be significantly different than probably anything else. I'm going to start, let's go full screen, and I'm going to start with showing you this. This is the $3,800 Dell laptop, and when I get to the display, here's what they say. It's a 15.6-inch OLED, which is organic LED, that has a much better quality, image quality, and by the way, even lower power consumption. It is a UHD or ultra high definition, what we typically call in TVs 4K. And how do you know? It's pretty close to 4,000 pixels by 2160. This is 4 times the size of a high definition, a regular 1080p screen. It's a 60 hertz refresh rate, so you get it, the screen changes 60 times per second. It can actually go 120 at different screens, not this one. 1 millisecond response time, so it's very, very fast. 400 NITs, those are the luminance components, and you see all kinds of things that you have. Oddly enough, it has a technology for eye tracking, so it can actually tell where you are. I'm going to click on the more info where they ask you to, or you ask them to help you choose a display. High definition, this is kind of the smaller size displays, 1280 by 720. Often you're going to see 1280 by 768. That's still high definition, but that's not really what we today think of high definition. What we today think of high definition is full HD or 1920 by 1080. So it's a little confusing. And what they're comparing here is not really the size as it is if the pixels were the same size, how big would the screen be? But typically the size of the screen is the size of the screen, and if you have higher definition, what you have is smaller pixels, and this is important. So so high definition 1280 by 720, or you're going to see 768. Full HD 1920 by 1080, and ultra high definition, what we call 4K, having 3840 by 2160. There is, if you go to the website, there is a lot of good definition of all of the different components here, but just kind of at the high level, the number of pixels. Maybe if you want to take a look at what OLED is, you're going to have, it's an organic LED, as I mentioned before. You're going to have a better explanation of what is it. Now, I want to do something here. I want to go back to laptops, and how about if we just go with, kind of run-of-the-mill, low-end laptops, and what can you get for $330? And you know what, maybe that's what we want to look at. What can you get for $380? The processor is not an Intel. I already told you Intel would be more expensive. So actually the first generation of Intel, let's just click on this one and go in greater detail. It is a 10th generation because we are in the 10th generation. It's an i3, so this is the lowest end Intel processor you have. Only 4 megabyte of cache compared to 12 or 16 at the higher processors, running at slower speed. You don't have a graphic card. You have Intel UHD graphics embedded in it. You only have 4 gigabyte as one card at 2666 megahertz. The hard disk drive is only 128. But if we go down and let's see what display we have here, the display is actually 1366 by 768, so it's not 1280. It's 1366 by 768. It's still HD. It is a 15.6 inch high definition. So here's what you saw. You saw several computers. One of them, and both of them had 15.6 inch displays, but one of them, the gaming computer, had a high-end display with 4K, ultra high definition. And this one that I'm showing you here only has 1366 by 768. Now, here's an interesting point for you. If you don't have applications that really use a lot of the screen and have a lot of information, and your eyes, not everybody here is in their 20s or 30s. We're wearing glasses. Sorry for the reflection. We're wearing glasses and we don't see that well. You may have a 15.6 inch screen, but and it's high definition or ultra high definition, you're not going to be able to see the things because they're so small. So the last two computers that I bought for my daughters, and they are 19 and 21, I got them computers with 1366 by 768 because for their applications, for what they need, this is a high enough resolution. And something else to keep in mind, the lower the resolution of the screen, the faster it is for the computer to process the image. There are just fewer pixels to control, to maintain or to change with every changing image. So this is something that you need to consider. I know it's kind of, it's very tempting if you can get an ultra high definition screen, 15.6. That is so much better than a 1366 by 768. Who even has 1366 by 768? Heck, for the life of me, I can get this for under $400 worth of a computer. But ask yourself, do I benefit from it? I'm pretty sure that you're not going to find $1,000 or $1,200 computer with this kind of screen. They're probably going to come with HD, with full HD, so 1920 by 1080. But it's just something to keep in mind. So several things to think about when you think about the display. Think about the resolution. Think about the size. You know, I told you at the beginning, I still have a laptop with 11.6 inch display, very portable, very light, very easy to travel with, very hard to see what's on it. Then there is kind of the 13.3 inch or 13 inch are the kind of the typical smaller laptops, not so much the 11.6 anymore. 15 inch to 15.6 are kind of the run-of-the-mill laptops. This is what you're going to find. This is where you're going to find the sweet spot. Remember that I talked about the sweet spot in terms of component size, weight, and everything else, and performance. And then the bigger ones, typically for gaming or video editing on the fly, on the go, are 17 to 17.3 inch displays with higher resolution. For me, it's just that I don't do the editing, even though I do them my editing on that laptop, but I don't do it with the laptop screen, which in my case is a 15.6 inch full high definition 1080p. What I do is I have a different screen, a bigger screen in front of me. I have a 27 inch screen, full high definition. I'm not even sure that a 4K, that I could handle 4K on a 27 inch screen. This is what I use for editing. So keep that in mind. We talked about the resolution, the size, the lighting. Just typically what I look for complaints. If people complained that the screen is not lit enough, if what you do is you're a speaker and all you need is for it to be kind of your monitor connected to a projector, typically you're going to have enough there. And finally, there are touch screens. So I think that my wife's laptop, it's a $500 laptop that we got from Costco, has a touch screen. It's good and bad. Typically the touch screen, because there is one more layer on top of the screen itself, it may affect the price slightly. It may affect the lighting that has to come through yet another layer, as transparent as it might be. And ask yourself, is this something that I need? Now, I would not buy a laptop because it has touch screen, unless I really use it as a two-in-one, you know, laptops that you can fold around and have use it as a tablet. But I use my iPad as a tablet. So I typically don't go for a laptop that has touch screen. If it has touch screen, okay, I don't see typically the benefit of it. So this is what you need to keep in mind in terms of the display. Next, we'll talk about interfaces, input and output. Okay, we're getting close to the end. I'm pretty sure we're already past an hour and a half, so I am going to have to break this into pieces. But you know what? I'm committed. You asked for it, so I'm sharing with you how I'm buying computer. Let's talk about inputs and outputs, all kinds of interfaces. So when you pick up a computer, if it's a desktop computer, the connections are typically in the back. Sometimes they have a few in the front. If it's a laptop computer, then it's all around, typically not in the front, but you're going to see them on the left side, on the right side, in the back. And you want to take a look and see what connections you have and what are the connections that are important. I'm going to say up front, there is an adapter for pretty much anything. You need Ethernet, there's an adapter that would plug you into USB and give you Ethernet. You need HDMI and you only have, I don't know, DisplayPort, there is an adapter for that. There is even an adapter from USB-C into HDMI. So there is an adapter or a docking station or whatever you have, and I'll talk a bit about docking stations later. But there are adapters that you can get and get any connector or any type of connector and how many connectors that you need. I'll just tell you about my own laptop. I have some kind of a docking station that had cost me $150 when I got it from Vision Tech. I bought it through Dell. We're going to take a look at the Dell's website. And it's connected to my laptop with just one cable, the USB-C cable. So if you look at the screen behind me, the USB-C is the one on the right. It's a newer connection. if USB originally was running at about 12 megabits per second, there is a low speed version of it that was running at barely 1 megabit per second. The USB 2, which was really when USB became pervasive, was running at 480 megabits per second. So it was running 40 times faster than the USB 1.1, I think it was called. And then they came up with, well, USB 3 was actually something that I pushed for, which is a long story, and I told that story in 2 of my books. But USB 3 is running at 5 gigabit per second, and the second generation was at 10 gigabit per second. USB-C, the one that you see on the right, it's kind of an oval as opposed to the square and slightly smaller, runs at 40 gigabits per second. So there's a lot that it can push out and into the laptop. So I only have USB-C to connect my laptop to that extender, that VisionTech extender. But then I have, I think, 8 different USB 3 ports, the higher speed ports on it. I have audio separately. I have another SD card reader here, and it connects to 2 different screens, 2 different displays. So 2 of the displays that I have here are actually connected through that adapter and not directly plugged into the laptop. And I have, what else do I have here? I have Ethernet. Ethernet, I actually take Ethernet through that adapter rather than connect it directly to my laptop, even though it has it. So I am not typically stuck on having enough connections going directly into the laptop for 2 reasons. One is I like the fact that there is only 1 cable going out of the laptop. So if I have to take the laptop with me, I take out 1 cable. I don't have to disconnect everything. And then when I come back, all I have to do is just plug 1 cable and I'm connected to everything, all the peripherals that I have here. I have 3, 4 disk drives. Audio connects to it. Ethernet, I already mentioned. Everything I have here is connected to that plug, to that adapter, and just 1 plug. If there are, I would say, 2 plugs that I would encourage you. If there's one, if you ask me what is the only 1 connection that you want to get out of the laptop, that you are not going to get a laptop without it, my answer is going to be USB-C. Because once you get USB-C out, you can get adapters to everything, including HDMI. I know that we're thinking about, it used to be VGA to connect to a projector or a TV. Now it's all digital, so it's all HDMI. It used to be even DVI at some point. Now it's all HDMI. But even without an HDMI cable, I know you would want, if you're presenting, if you're taking your laptop, you want to have an HDMI port on your laptop. But heck, if there is an adapter for that, really the only one thing that I would want to insist on is that you get an HDMI and I'm sorry, a USB-C. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into the website and we're going to take a look at a computer, at several computers, and actually see what ports do they have. So I think that this typically comes, well, actually you can see it already here in the pictures. So if you go to the pictures of that computer, you can start seeing what it has. And typically this would be a better picture. Does this actually have a CD reader? That is something that I haven't seen in a while. I mean, it's like everything, every software, all the software that you download it, you get into your computer, you get it through download. So that's actually an interesting point. You know, I just have to see, to check if it does say that this thing has hard drive, optical drive not included. So there's probably place for it, but it's not included. So it's not completely there. I can see a USB port. I can see a full-size SD reader, SD card reader. Let's see what we have on the other side. That is our USB-C. We have USB-C. This would be Ethernet. This is HDMI, 2 USB ports. And this would be power with a little LED that shows that it is connected to power, and this is audio. Now, I know that because I've done that for a long time, but if you go down somewhere in the specs, you're going to find something like this. So everything I told you. One is an SD card reader. You want to make sure that it's full-size SD card, and not micro. Once again, and if it is, then you buy, don't worry about it. Then you're gonna buy a little adapter, a USB to SD card reader, and you're done. USB 2.0, this is the lower speed USB. So this is something to keep in mind, by the way. Your computer may be surrounded with USB ports and they're not all the same. So this is USB 2. That means that the speed on this USB port, even though it looks the same, acts the same, quacks the same, is 1/20th or 1/10. Actually, this is USB 3.1. So this is, but they say it's Gen 1. So it's 1/10th of the speed of port number 7. They look the same. This one is 1/10th of the speed, or this one is 10 times faster. As I said, number 4 is power. Number 5, HDMI. HDMI 1.4. So you may want to know that today we have HDMI 2.0A. Is that going to make a big difference for you when you present? No, not really. 1.4 is plenty. 2.0 is going to have a lot of surround sound and other functionality that you may not care about with. I mean, I have like, I think a $40 speaker system here, and that's it. Number 6, as I said, is an RJ45. That's your Ethernet connection directly in here. USB 3.1, USB 3.1, both of them are Gen 1. If they were Gen 2, they're twice as fast. Headphone and microphone audio jack, you have this here. There is one more thing that I'm going to mention, and this is camera. So you want to pay attention and know what camera you're going to have. The cameras that you have, and let's try and see if we have the specs on the camera. You know what, I'm just going to do Control F, camera. Oh, the word camera is not even here. And I'm sure that this laptop, even this laptop, has a camera. In fact, if I look at it here, there's your camera. And right next to the camera is a little light to light you up. Microphone is typically going to be embedded somewhere here. Some laptops have the camera in the bottom. One thing to know about the camera that you have in laptops is that for the most part, these cameras are, and they're going to say that they're high definition ports and slots. What does port? That's the picture we saw before. They're going to say for the most part that it's high definition, but if you remember that high definition is actually 720p and not 1080p. When you're doing video conferencing, webinars, or something like this, you will need an external camera. I mean, when you look at the quality that you see from me here, this is not quality that you're going to get from your integrated camera at the top of the screen inside the laptop. This is not the quality you're going to get from a C920. I do have a C920 here. I'm using a DSLR, but even the C920, that's a full HD 1080p camera, and the camera inside of the computer is way cheaper, way lower quality. And in fact, I think that I can probably just let's just add the camera since I'm on it, and just to kind of show you what the internal camera looks like. Internal, and we're going to take the camera, the integrated webcam, and this is the quality that you get. So let's make it a little bigger. See, this is the quality that you would get from this kind of, from the internal camera. It's not great quality, much better quality. So is it good to have the integrated camera? I don't think that you can get, even for $300, you can get a laptop that does not have an integrated camera. And if you don't have any other camera with you, just use that. But even if you're traveling, frankly, the C920 or any other high definition webcam is small enough for you to be able to handle it, to carry it with you and have a much better experience, or the people on the other side of the call will have much better experience. Okay, I mentioned that you will be able to get any port that you need through extenders, and so I'm going to look at the, once again, I'm already on the Dell's website, but others have it, and actually this is not even made by Dell. And what I'm going to show you is they recommend all kinds of accessories. One of the accessories is something that's called the docking station. Sometimes they refer to it as port extenders and what have you. So this one, what does it have? It has two HDMI or DisplayPort adapters. It's connected through USB. It has quite a few things, and so if instead what we did was actually just went to the top and under Dell, we are going to look for, let's see if we have docking stations somewhere, maybe just under laptops. I don't really see it here, so how about if we just type docking station, already comes out, and it's going to take us to some of the docking stations that they have. I think the one that I have is this one, the VisionTech 4000, VT4000. It shows as $200. I believe that when I got that, it was it only cost $150. And here are all the things that you can connect to it. Two screens, so it's not both of these connectors. It's either this one or that one. You have DisplayPort and you have HDMI. There are external USBs here. This is the USB-C that connects it into my laptop. This is an Ethernet jack. This is the power jack. If we look at the other side, 4 USB 3 ports, and we have an audio port. So, you know, just like there is an app for this, there is an extender for this. So this is why I typically don't get overly excited about whether we have certain ports or we don't, with the exception of USB-C. I really want to have USB-C because that gives me the ability to have extensions at the highest possible performance. One more thing, and I'm not going to talk about it right now, but I have my little bag of tricks, and this bag of tricks is what I carry with me with all the adapters that you can think of, and I never ran into problem without the right adapter. I have an adapter from almost anything to anything, and I can tell you how many times it saved, well, not saved my life, but saved performances, and not just mine, but other people's as well. I know you're going to now write me that you want a description of what's in it, and I'll just do a video at some point of the content of my my goodie bag. I think I have just one more thing to talk about, and I'll talk about that in the next segment. Okay, we're pretty much at the end. I covered all of the components that I described first in the block diagram. Yes, are there more components, but not something that I typically care about when I choose a computer. And now it leaves us with an interesting question, and that is, how do you get exactly what you want? I mean, let's say that you can make this shopping list and say, this is exactly what I want. I mean, there are several ways to get there. One of them is you can actually build your computer from scratch, which is typically not something that you will do with a laptop, but you could do with desktop. So there are people who buy the box and they buy the power supply and the motherboard, and they can configure, typically gamers who do that, because they can configure exactly what they wanted and optimize performance for a very specific application, typically gaming. You really need to know what you're doing when you do that. I'm very technical. I am not sure I'm going to take a risk and build the computer from scratch. But that's one possibility, and there are people who do that. The second part is to get whatever they have and say, you know, I'm just going to take this laptop with whatever they have, and it is what it is. But I think that today you get a lot of optionality or options to configure when you buy it. And so for that purpose, what I did was I got this, you know, I've done enough with Dell, so we're going to do this with HP. And I'm looking at their gaming computers again. It's a gaming computer that I'm looking at. And you can see that many of them would already have something that's called customize and buy. So there's a button here that says customize and buy, which, by the way, is so much better than out of stock. So we're going to customize and buy this computer. And since they typically build them to ship them and they're not already built and waiting, they can customize it for you. So this is an example of what it looks like. You can choose whether you want Windows Home or Pro. Processor, they're telling you this is what's included in the price. You have an i5 10th generation. This is the first two digits here with whatever RGB liquid cooling. This really just for looks. This is the processor. But you know what? How about if we upgrade it? Let's throw in another $400 and get an i9. So you can actually choose whatever you would like. 8 gigabyte. Really? You think I'm going to get an i9 10th generation with how many cores? 10 cores and have it settle for 8 gigabyte? Not even 16 gigabyte. This thing can go up to 64 gigabyte. I'm not sure I'm not going to get 64, but even if I'm not getting 64, at least I'll make sure that I only use, obviously this computer has 4 slots. I'm only going to use 2 of them. So I can configure it this way. Now this is, it says now it's included on price, but now the price is $1,700 as opposed to what it was before. I think we started at under $1,200. We have Care Pack. We don't care about the Care Pack right now. No Optane. I don't think that there's an option. No RAID. RAID is type of storage, network storage. What storage do we have? This thing comes with 256 gigabyte PCI Express. If I'm buying a $2,000 desktop computer, I probably am going to run software that's going to take way more than that. So let's see what the options are. Western Digital Black 2 terabyte PCI Express NVMe TLC. That's what we want, an SSD. It's going to add $340. Do we need a secondary storage? You'll notice that the secondary storage, they're not even offering you here a, they're all SATA, S-A-T-A interface, which means they're going to be slower, but based on this 7200 RPM and 7200 RPM here, you can tell that this is a computer that, a hard drive that's electromechanical. I'm not crazy about those. Man, they have 3rd and 4th storage possibilities, but you will see that even those, the 3rd one and the 4th one, it's just slots in the computer that allow you to add drives. But I'm not sure. I would probably get this computer without the 2nd, 3rd, or 4th and buy an SATA SSD drive and add it there. Graphics card, this one, actually there's only one option here, the 1660, which is kind of surprising because the 1660 is an older generation. I would have expected this computer to have at least an NVIDIA RTX 2060 or 70 or even 80. Today we're at 3080. This is the box itself, networking. It comes with Wi-Fi. We never talked about Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, but that's pretty standard. They all come with Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. And if you're thinking, can they come with Wi-Fi but not Bluetooth? It's typically the same component. So if it has Wi-Fi, it also has Bluetooth. MIMO is an interesting technology. This thing has a Bluetooth 5. MIMO is an interesting technology, multiple input, multiple output supported. By reading supported, I'm guessing there are no multiple antennas in this one, but this is typically what it will do. So if we go back to the first option was you build your computer completely from scratch. The second option is you buy whatever they have exactly the way they have it. But since it's not on the shelf just waiting for you to order, they are going to customize it. So why don't you just go through it and see what is it that you need, what are the different components, and so you let them customize. There is a 4th option, and the 4th option is you get the computer and you upgrade it later. This is something that you need. It's not as complicated as completely building the computer from scratch, but it is something that you need to do with caution. So I did that. I did that on my computer. I upgraded both hard disk drives. I'm thinking about upgrading the RAM, but it kind of looks, when I look at videos on YouTube on how to upgrade the RAM, I'm a little nervous with doing that. I think that at some point I will just buy 32 gigabytes. Unfortunately, this computer came with 16 gigabytes, 2 slots, but 2 8 gigabyte cards. So if I want to upgrade from 16 to 32, I have to buy the entire 32. So that is the 4th option of how you get exactly what you want. So either you build it from scratch, not so much laptops, more desktops, or you you customize it with them, or you buy whatever they have off the shelf, or I already said that. And the last one is you buy it and then you upgrade it later. And so you may want to think about what does it have that will allow you to upgrade it later. That's pretty much it. Once again, this is how I choose computers. I know that there are people that are smarter than me, more technical than me, know more about computers than me, and would say, hey, no, I do something else and I'm smarter. Fine, you're smarter. This is how I do it, and all I'm doing is sharing with you how I'm choosing a laptop. I hope this has been helpful. I think we're probably at a 2-hour mark of this video, so I'll split it into, it's going to be available as one full video, and as parts, as pieces, I'm going to break it out. Believe it or not, this has been a one-day project. I'm already edited almost everything I've recorded until this point, and I am committed. I'm going to be done with this video today, and this video is going to be on YouTube tonight. Depends on how long it's going to take to upload a 2-hour file. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope this has been helpful, and I will see you on whatever my next video is going to be, probably about a week from now. Be good.
If this video was helpful to you, go ahead and subscribe to my channel so that you will get notified whenever I release another video like this, because I do it about once a week. Also, go ahead and check my Tech Tips for Speakers playlist so you'll see the videos that I already have recorded. And may trust be with you.